everybody. Welcome to another episode of Be Heard Women Empowering Women. And today I'm very excited to have a young woman here, Veronika. And how do you pronounce your last name?
Amaya.
I thought so, Amaya. And Amaya has a podcast about relationships with her husband, Matt. They just got married in October last year. Yes,
Yeah.
am I correct? Okay. And she is a relationship coach and focuses on spirituality and authenticity and helps women reconnect to their divine feminine magic, which I will talk about later. And your podcast with your husband, Matt, you two have in depth conversations about conscious living, emotional empowerment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Um, so I always wanted to do a project with my husband Matt
Mhm.
because people always told us that it's rare for them to see a relationship like ours. Because we know each other for 6 years. From the beginning, we have really done so much conscious work to better our communication, to have a really beautiful flow of masculine and feminine energy,
Mm.
and also to really be a really good team. And so I thought it would be so beautiful for people just to see us talking with each other,
Mhm.
to get a little bit of an idea of how it could be, to be in a relationship
In
that's
a
actually
healthy
really connected.
relationship. Yes. And
Yes.
and I think you would agree with me that before you can do that, you need a foundation of self-acceptance, correct? You have to care
Yes,
about
and
yourself.
definitely, and also of really great self-awareness, because otherwise you're not becoming aware when you have triggers and you think, oh, my husband did something, I'm so annoyed with him, and not to realize, oh, actually, it's a lot about my trigger. He maybe didn't do such a bad thing or such
Right,
an, you
right.
know.
Do you feel there was a time in your life when you had some negative beliefs around men?
Yes, very strongly. I actually, that was a big part of my work, because how I grew up with was that my mother, she, first of all, she was quite like a feminist.
Hmm.
But I think also just because of her life experiences, she grew up on a farm, and the boys were always favored, and that really imprinted on her. So she just
Hmm.
had this belief that men have it easy and women have it really hard. And that's what I was basically hearing all the time. So that was the lens, how beliefs are. That's how you see the
Yes,
world.
yes.
Yes. And
Well,
so,
go
yeah.
ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah, that's what I was perceiving.
Hmm.
And when I was maybe 25 or 26, I started to realize that that's not the full story, that men suffer equally as women, and that for relationships, it's really unhealthy if you have this belief, because
Hmm.
imagine you want to attract a man into your life, but a part of you thinks that men are manipulative, terrible, bossy, arrogant, even
Controlling.
violent.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
I can relate to that because I grew up with a father that was an alcoholic, and he had a lot of issues around his adoption and his identity. I believe, this is my own opinion, and from just little things that happened when I was young, I believe he might have been a gay man that in the 40s was absolutely not accepted, and getting married and having children was really not who his true self was meant to be. Not the having children part, let me take that back, but the getting married to a woman, let's put it that way. And we never saw them kiss or anything. And I always say to my brother, well, they must have had sex 4 times because they have 4 children. But growing up in that household, um, needless to say, my creativity or idea of who I was stifled completely because we're talking about 50s into the 60s. And so I had that idea that men were in control, even though I fought against it. And again, feminism was booming in the early 60s. And I was part of that as a young woman. But on the same token, I'm still in these controlling relationships where the men are trying to control me. And it was abusive. I had a couple abusive relationships in the 60s and 70s. So, did you have any trauma or anything during your childhood that you want to share with us? Anything?
Yeah. So that is such a good point that you're making, because first of all, I think what's important to clarify is that, of course, if we say, that the beliefs that all men are bad is not true, doesn't mean that there are, of course, men, right? As there are women out there that are violent and abusive. And that's totally truth. It's just not all men. But
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the issue with the beliefs is, and that's a little bit ironic actually, when you hold beliefs that men are controlling, manipulative, it's very likely that you attract those kinds of men into your life, as you have experienced.
Agree.
Um, yes, and that was my same experience, because I would say I have both, trauma. And when I talk about trauma, I just mean like growing up a very normal middle class family. Nothing big happened, but what was the trauma around my dad was that he was very emotionally unavailable, and I always wanted more connection and love from him than he was able to give me. And so my first boyfriends, they were all very emotionally unavailable, and I just sometimes I thought it was like I was constantly thirsty and that there was no water.
Yeah,
And I couldn't even put my finger on, because I never even had met a
yeah,
man.
yeah.
And what helped me actually tremendously was to have a male therapist. It was kind of like the same age than my dad, and he was so different. And I was like, oh, okay,
It
that's
was
what
a
it feels like.
father figure. That was good. And you
Yeah.
know what you said about attracting what you don't want, because subconsciously, I think our little girl, our inner child, whatever you want to call it, wants to fix that relationship that she did not have. So therefore, we are attracted to these men that might have the same characteristics that hurt us with our fathers, and now we're going to like make them love us, and I know in my case, two very damaged husbands I had, um, and back then I did not see the pattern. I could not see the pattern because I was in it.
Mm.
Okay, now I can look back in retrospect and say, oh my gosh, you know and and I think I came out of that too with some control issues. And do you find that a lot of people, a lot of women, have like underlying control issues and they don't even realize it?
Wow, this is such a good point that you're making, because actually my relationship coaching program for women, which is called Awaken Your Inner Goddess, that's one of the main points I teach women, because you are totally right. It's I think the controlling comes a lot from growing up in a very unsafe environment, and with unsafe, it just means simply emotionally unsafe. And so if someone feels unsafe, they start to control. And what I noticed is that women very often have the view of men that they are childish, that they don't know how to organize their life, that they cannot be left alone with children, for example, such beliefs. And so many women actually start to baby men. They tell them what to wear, how to treat their friends, not to forget the birthdays, and
Mm-hmm.
then when the man doesn't set boundaries, often it can get really that they talk to them very disrespectfully, and like a child basically.
Yeah.
And that obviously destroys the relationship, and especially, of course, also the intimacy,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
men
The
don't want to sleep
role
with their
is not.
mother.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, and I call it learned helplessness because, the more, and I'm guilty of this with my present husband, now I'm with my third husband 34 years. So there's the testimony that you can find a healthy relationship. We had a curvy path to get there, but he has Parkinson's and it is the progressive type. And I found I was doing more and more for him that he probably could have did for himself. And I was making more and more of the decisions. Okay. And he was just sitting back and letting it happen. And to the point where 2020, I went into a depression And the reason I know I was depressed, I have been diagnosed with chronic depression and anxiety disorder, but I was being very mean to him. And you know that anger, sometimes when you're depressed, it comes out as anger towards someone else. Okay. And, you know, thank God I got help and I have therapy again. I hadn't had therapy in years, years and years. But I went back into therapy to talk about some of these issues, right? And that if you're with a person, and hopefully you'll be with Matt a long time. By the way, my youngest brother's named Matt.
Mm.
Little coincidence. You don't know what illnesses you might get or what kind of turns you might have in life. And the point of a strong marriage is to communicate and to trust each other, I think. And I couldn't do that with my first two husbands. I absolutely could not trust them with anything, you know. So, what do you think? Now, I reached out and I got some help. And even though, I'm older, I pretty much have a good life and everything, I knew I needed help. Veronika, what do you think keeps people when they're struggling to reach out for help?
Yeah.
Have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think it has a few reasons. One of them, of course, is that, therapy and coaching, all the self-help stuff is very stigmatized for many people, and they
Mhm.
just feel that it's an admittance to failure, which, of course, I think it's actually the opposite. It's one of the bravest things to be vulnerable with a stranger and to open yourself up.
Mhm.
Um, and then, additional to that, I th- many people, I think, feel that if they once open it, it's like the Pandora's box. They have
Mm.
no idea what's gonna lurk in the shadows. So they think, oh my gosh, if I start talking about my marriage problems, for example, maybe then all my childhood deepest, darkest fears will come up and they will swallow me whole. And to be fair, sometimes it is like this,
Mhm.
because we really have a society that thrives on suppression. I mean, that's what we get taught since we are little. Don't cry, don't think about it, think positively. Of course, thinking positive has a place, but it shouldn't be done to avoid anything that brings us
Mhm.
pain and
Exactly.
to shove it all into our
Exactly.
little mind drawers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I'm telling you what. It doesn't matter how long you are working on yourself. There's always more work to be done. You know. And I had 5 decades of relationship experience, good and bad, and I still have areas that can trigger me. You know, and I have to learn to not react, but to respond. And in order to respond and not react, you have to pause. And that's the hard part for me. So I am the mindfulness of, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Take a second, take a beat, take a beat. And like a lot of times, my husband will just, God bless him, he'll want to try it. He'll go get his own coffee, but then he spills half of it on the floor. And what's my reaction going to be? I'm sorry, I'm not a saint. It's not going to be, oh, yeah, his Parkinson's. No, I'm inside. I'm going to go, son of a gun, you supposed to go, I gotta clean it. You know what I mean? It's like it's a tightrope. You let yourself be human. I mean, that's what that is, a human response, right? There's a mess. I got to clean it up because he can't. I'm not happy about that. But then you pause, and it's such a fine line, like I said. What about now? You don't have to tell, but is there something Matt does that sometimes triggers you, like something
oh,
small?
so many things.
I
Like,
thought you'd say that.
yes, I really want to say here that, like, this is my job, right? I'm a relationship coach, but all my experience comes from my life.
Yes.
And I want to really encourage everyone that you don't have to be perfect. And most of us had such intense childhoods that, even to be, as I said, in a good team, in a good relationship, is like an amazing accomplishment. And sometimes it will happen that you're going to be so mean to your husband or wife or partner. And for me, it's the same. Like, for example, sometimes what really what really gets me going is, for example, the household. Such a classical thing, right? I just like it much cleaner, and he's sometimes a little bit messy. And
Mhm.
I already learned, to be much more like appreciative, because one of the reasons why he's a bit messy is because men are very single-minded, and he is doing amazing in his job. And I know that he would always work for his family to support us. That's beautiful, but that also means that sometimes he just can't see, or he doesn't see, when
It's
there's
tunnel
something.
vision. Yeah. It's tunnel
Yes,
vision. He's
yes,
focused on his work and he doesn't see the socks in the corner.
exactly. And
It's so silly, but
yeah.
it's true. I will go by now again. I have the added factor of him having Parkinson's, but even before Parkinson's, a little bit. You know, it's like with children. There could be a piece of paper on the floor and it'll be there all day if I don't pick it up. You know, so sometimes that annoys me, and then I go, okay, Marie, he's not aware. He's trying to focus on just being able to walk from one place to another without falling, you know. But it's amazing how our humanity does that. We go back to being very selfish and self-centered, getting annoyed by these little trivial things that we need to pause sometimes. But I do want to talk to you about something I don't want to run out of time, because my daughter Jennifer, well, I have three daughters, but she's an amazing woman. They all are. And she was in the Marines. I could not understand it after high school when she said she wanted to be in the Marines. I thought, what? How about the Air Force or the Navy? Like the Marines seem so masculine, right? And she was a sergeant, and she was in the Marines for 10 years. And she became a counselor, and she counsels military people with psychological issues, that kind of thing. Very, very stressful work. So she's also into other things like mindfulness and yoga and things, otherwise be too much for her. And I wanted her to do a podcast with me, which she will do in the future. And she said, oh, can I talk about the goddess archetypes? I'm like, what? What? So yeah, I said, well, sure, you can talk about anything you want, but it's fine. So now I tried to set a date with her, and she was, oh, I'm not ready. I have to look this stuff up and I have to make an outline. I'm like, Jenny, it's only a 35-minute show. So I know you talk about your inner goddess. That's where I was headed with this story, and divine feminine energy. So what do you mean by that?
Oh, first of all, wow, your daughter sounds amazing. What an incredible life journey.
Oh,
And
mhm.
wow, I admire everybody. I wouldn't last 5 minutes in the military. I'm so sensitive. um, and yeah, and so what I mean with the goddess is really the part of us, first of all, that is deeply, deeply feminine. And even that, I notice many women have no idea anymore what it means to be feminine, what that even is, the
Right.
part of us that is connected to the earth, that is in our bodies, that is very intuitive. And that is an amazing part to be connected with, because, for example, talking about toxic relationships, abusive men, this part will tell you. It's like the bullshit radar is on, like that part knows.
Yeah.
But the other thing about it is also of the goddess is the part of us that is most precious. And we as women often, I think, have a feeling, especially young women, I think as well, that we are not queens, you're not goddesses, we're not worth it. And so we get into these relationships with men or in work situations where we basically sell ourselves short.
Mhm.
And that's really what I want to invite the women again, because the feminine energy is amazing. I mean, there's a reason why there's all these myths about the queens where the knights would fight for them and die. I mean, whole wars are fought over the feminine. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful gift.
Yes.
And I want to help women again, because it doesn't
And,
matter how you look, it
oh
doesn't
no,
matter how old
no.
you are.
And I think too that you know, patriarchal formats through the centuries, we have always been, kind of held back by men, a lot of men, and I think they're afraid of us sometimes. The the author of A Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if you've seen that. It was on Hulu. Very interesting about modern day America, but a section of it going back to like ancient times where women were subservient to the point of they were classes of whether they were for babies, whether they were good enough to be wives, etc. Okay. And what's interesting about that, Margaret Atwood was the author. She asked a group of women one time what they were afraid of. And she prefaced it with this whole idea of controlling men, toxic men. And afterward, she said, when I ask men what they're afraid of with women, they say that they might laugh at us. And when I ask a woman, they say that they might kill us. Now, I know that sounds so strong, but being through it, I know that there's some truth in that because I had a relationship where, seriously, if he can't have me, nobody else can. And I was stalked and I was physically attacked. Now, you have a nice, healthy, looks loving, gentle man. I could see that. I looked at some of your podcasts and I could tell he's just a little dull. But do you think that there's some toxic men out there that can be dangerous?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. So what you were speaking to before is so true that for example, there's many studies done when women go out in public that they are much, much, much more scared, than men. And I believe that it's deep in our tissues from so many centuries, thousands of years of violence against women that we just have this deep fear. And also part of us knows that almost every man out there could kill you with their bare hands. I mean, that's just a fact. But I also want to speak to that, sometimes I think the perspective is lost that women have very much fought back through the centuries. And how they do that is through manipulation, using often their sexual powers, but also I always call it like energetic castration. So what that means basically, I don't know if you've ever heard of this,
No, that
is
sounds interesting.
how unconsciously often women with their little boys, they are very scared of their masculinity. So they are basically wanting them to not be that, not be very forward, assertive, maybe aggressive because they are scared of it. But the problem is that you are cutting a man's power basically because you don't want a man to be not assertive or not confident. Of course you want him to be loving and loving women, protecting them, right? But I think there's a really huge difference. And when I coach men, unfortunately, I mean, all the men I work with, they are so kind, like loving, they want to support women, but a part of them feels that they are bad just because they are men, and that is like some real shame issues that actually cut their confidence, and then very often women don't find them attractive.
Oh, yes. I see what you're saying too, because in my younger years, the men I was attracted to were, which I did not even know the term then, toxic males, because they exhibited those what I thought were masculine qualities of being strong and being in control of a situation. And part of me, I think, liked that until it went too far and they wanted to control my every move. My first husband didn't want me to wear makeup, didn't want me to dress in anything but jeans and denim jackets, really like that. And then that's when sometimes your marriage, you don't see it right away, but it's an abusive relationship and it's headed the wrong direction. And it did. And I just know, like, now I had 3 girls to raise. And we have our issues even today, but we're women and we relate on a level that's pretty similar most of the time. And my granddaughter made me a great grandmother, which How dare she? No, I joke a lot because my oldest daughter turned 50, and I said, I still tell people I'm 50. I can't explain you because we want to look young. And then my granddaughter, who's 24, she had a beautiful, beautiful boy, who's my great grandson. He'll be 3 in August. I adore him, and he's so smart. But I can see when he's running around and we're on FaceTime, I see the boy. I see the boy in him. It is obvious, obvious. And it is, I find it hysterical because when a male friend comes to the house, oh, that's it. He's got to be right by him. If they're fixing something, he runs and gets a screwdriver. You could see it. And I think today too, we can't get deep into this, nor shall we, because I don't think I have enough knowledge. But this whole thing with transgender, I have a cousin whose grandchildren were adopted as boys, and the one boy decided very, very young that he was a girl. And I am talking like 3 years old. And I recently, and they kind of like did a slow transition to it, letting the hair grow long, different things. And I had asked her, now, how are the surrounding family members dealing with this? And she's a child psychologist. And the one side of the family is fine, the other side isn't. It's none of their business, really. But my point is, I think at a very young age, you know who you are. Do you know what I'm saying? You know who you are. And it's just amazing that we can even talk about that today, right? Do you know if I brought this subject up even 20 years ago, they'd be like, what? Shut up.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned my father. He might have been gay his whole life, but he couldn't be himself. So instead, he drank. And that's sometimes too the things we put up with in our childhood experience, in our childhood, are coming from our parents' damage from when they were children. But
Yeah.
when you're a child, even a teenager, you're not going to see the correlation. You're not going to see the correlation. Right? Do you find that? You see that because you talk to
Yes.
a lot of people.
Yes, definitely. I mean,
I know I just gave you
sometimes
a
I
lot
believe,
right there.
yes,
Threw a
no.
lot at you.
Sometimes I feel like my only purpose in life is to kind of like heal all the trauma over the generations because it accumulates. And there's also like humans are such social beings that whatever your parents find disgusting, horrible, unacceptable, you automatically want to not do, right? Because you want to do everything to please them so that your
Makes sense.
survival is
Right.
it's in your nervous system. So it's very,
Right.
very difficult to
Right.
go against that. And I also think that it's beautiful that we have a more open society. But in terms of young children, I think it's also really important to help them to really find their own way, because sometimes I feel a little bit with the transgender topic is that it's definitely like a bit of an in topic. So I would really, just make sure that they know that whatever happens, whatever they want, that they are deeply, deeply loved. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
To not push them in one or the other direction,
No.
because of course the transgender direction is going to be a hard one, very difficult, just because of the medical situation. So
it's just everybody has their own opinion, and some people think that they are right, everybody else is wrong. So now we get into these issues politically. It's ongoing. So we're just trying to work on ourselves and maybe people in our circle, because we can't fix the world, right? Not all by ourselves, but every person that does shed a little light and peace and love, that makes the world a little less dark. And that's why I'm doing these podcasts. Have you ever considered writing a book?
Yes, actually, I would. Yes, I would love to. And I just came up from a call because I'm on a mastermind with other women coaches, so we support each other. And there's a woman who wrote a book in 3 months, and she actually teaches others to write it in 3 months. I was like, wow, that sounds incredible, because sometimes I feel like I have so much in me and it
Yes,
just wants
yes.
to, you know.
Here's the thing. My therapist had told me in 2021, sit down in your room alone every day for an hour and write. And I wrote my memoir in 9 months and I self-published it. It's on Amazon. It's called Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons.
Wow.
Yeah, it's perfect because yeah, everything we're talking about. And and of course I have the podcast and I'm starting a book club, and that is going to feature a woman's book each month, a different woman, and they're going to be authors that have been on my podcast. So when you write your book, you let me know. We'll feature you. This has been great. It went by so fast. So
Yes.
so I think what we'll do is I'll have you back again. And before we close, you do have a website called the Soft Feminine Circle, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's a part of my offering. So my website is veronikaamaya.com, and the I call it the Soft Women and Women Circle is where we meet every 2 weeks, and we are practicing together to be more
Mhm.
feminine,
Mhm.
soft. Basically, what I do in my coaching program as well, and how to relate with men from this place, because especially my generation, many women don't know anymore. They are so used to in their work to be very
Mhm.
masculine and
Mhm.
assertive, and then around men it becomes very difficult because you can't have two masculine relating with each other. It's just going to be
Oh,
butting
yeah,
heads,
I know. I
and
know.
you're
We
not
were
going
both,
to
my husband and I were both a very, what did they call it? Type A personalities. So one of us had to give, so he gave. I did a good job. All right, this has been wonderful. I really enjoyed talking to you, Veronica, and we will talk again. Thanks everyone for listening, and I hope you listen to this podcast because it was absolutely amazing. Thanks again.
thank you so much.